Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Myths episode. It has been quite some time since the last episode, so if you enjoy this series and you want more, definitely hit the like button to show your support. But without wasting any more time, let's get right into the special episode of the Illaoi myths, because there is a lot to cover. The first one is asking what's the interaction with Illaoi's ult and E ability with invisible units. So first, let's get the more simple one out of the way, the interaction with Illaoi's ultimate and an invisible unit around her. So here as Shaco goes into his Q form, Illaoi pops her ultimate and you see a tentacle still spawns as it hits Shaco while he is invisible. But here's the one that is a bit more interesting. Let's try out and see what happens with her E ability. So as Shaco goes into his Q once again, I use the E, landed on him while he's invisible, get the spear dragged out of him still, and it also ended up revealing him. But what if we use the E first and then Shaco uses his invisibility, will we still see him? And the answer is most definitely yes, as we see Shaco in his invisibility form for the full duration. And just to make sure this is not something specific to the minion only, we also tested this on Summoner's Rift. The results yielded were the exact same, and this is very interesting because this means that her E ability is a direct counter to stealth champions, though it doesn't say that it does reveal them within the E tooltip. Moving on to the next myth, will Bard ultimate also affect Illaoi's tentacles and the spirit from her E ability? So the first test case scenario is actually quite simple. Bard will use his ultimate on the tentacle spawned on the south side of the map, and you can see that it does affect it and that tentacle becomes rendered useless for a couple seconds. But will the same thing apply if Illaoi first uses her ultimate, which makes her tentacles untargetable? Or will Bard ultimate now completely whiff and have no effect on the tentacles? As it happens in the video, you see that the Bard ultimate had absolutely no effect whenever Illaoi does have her ultimate ready and active. And in the final part of this myth, we'll be testing Illaoi's E ability and Bard's ultimate, and as I finally pull out his spirit, Bard will ult the spirit as it's about to disappear to see if it prolongs the duration of the spirit, assuming it works as intended. But unfortunately, the ultimate actually has no effect whatsoever on the spirit. The third myth is asking what's the interaction with Illaoi's ultimate and E ability with champion clones. This one might get a little confusing, but bear with me. So first off, let's test the interaction with Illaoi ultimate and Shaco's ultimate, which happens to be also his clone. As Shaco uses his ultimate, Illaoi pops hers as well, but only one tentacle spawns from the ult, therefore meaning that the clone has no effect in that regard. So we know that the champion clones like Shaco or LeBlanc even don't work as we maybe expected it to, but how about something like a Mordekaiser ultimate? Well, as Mordekaiser finally gets his clone of Soraka and he has two people on his team, again Illaoi pops her ultimate, but only one tentacle is still spawning. Okay, well how about something like a Yorick ultimate, since they do seem to kind of work differently in certain situations. So the first part of Yorick ultimate, where he has the clone of the champion, you can use the Illaoi ultimate, but you'll still only get one tentacle spawning. But how about the second part of Yorick's ultimate, where he actually becomes the ghost and the champion or the player can control the ghost as if it's their own champion? Well, in this case, the answer is yes. They'll actually count that as a real champion and spawn a tentacle based off of that. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, that doesn't give Illaoi any form of advantage in terms of spawning more tentacles than she deserves. But let's check out the interaction of her E ability with some of these clones, with the first of which being LeBlanc. As the clone is running away from myself, I use the E ability on her, and you can see even though it did hit, it does not pull out the spirit whatsoever. Which is interesting because those champions do normally take and absorb other champion abilities and ultimates. But in this example, I use my E ability on the Yorick ultimate clone as well, and again, no interaction. And even the second part of Yorick's ultimate does not have any interaction with Illaoi's E ability, even though this part did spawn a tentacle with Illaoi's ultimate. Let's move on to the next one. What's the interaction between Tahm Kench's Devour and Illaoi's E ability? So the first thing we're testing is to see whether or not Tahm Kench can devour the clone or spirit that is dragged out from a champion. And unfortunately for the hungry Tahm Kench, the answer is no, and he cannot use his W on a spirit. But what happens if Tahm Kench eats Lux after I pull out her spirit and then leaves the area of the zone? Will she still become a vessel? Well, as it's clearly shown here, even though he did take her out of the zone of the spirit with his own devour, she still became a vessel. So it does seem like there's almost no escaping it. The next myth is asking what happens if the enemy jungler is a vessel and a tentacle spawns and kills the blue buff or red buff that they're doing. So this one is a bit more obvious, but it's still something that's really cool and interesting to actually see happen. So the setup is as follows. Malphite is a vessel, the tentacle there will smack him and try to hit him while also hitting the blue buff in just a couple seconds. Since the blue buff was clearly in the line of damage, the tentacle killed it, I got the experience even though I'm nowhere near it, got the blue buff as well, and this can have some seriously interesting results in some certain gameplays. Let's not waste time and continue on with the myths. Will Illaoi's E ability count as a tentacle spawn with her ultimate? So in case you didn't see my new video of the Illaoi tips and tricks, which I do recommend checking out if you haven't, I did mention in there that this is definitely possible if you have a spirit out and use your ultimate to spawn an extra tentacle, which is interesting considering this almost never worked when we tested this with the champion clones earlier. Myth number 7 is asking, how does Illaoi's E ability work with Zilean ultimate? So here's an interaction that may not be exactly what you may have expected it to be. So first I pull out Zilean's spirit, he then ults himself, I kill him, and as he's reviving, his spirit is still very much there and I can still whack it later to have it deal damage to him once he's finally done reviving. But I'm sure most of you thought of this when you saw that clip. What happens if you attack the spirit while he's still in the animation of actually reviving? Well, we test exactly that right here, and you can still definitely hit it, though the damage will not be given to him while he's reviving, as he still respawned with the full amount of HP from his ultimate. But the cool thing is the fact that he still became a vessel regardless. Next, let us find out if he can Zhonya's or Q assess Illaoi's E ability. So let's see if there really is anything you can do to remove this absolutely ridiculously annoying ability. So it turns out you cannot Q assess the fact that the spirit has been drawn out of you. But what if you've already become a vessel? Are you then able to use Q assess and remove that off of you? Well, in this example here, the Zilean just became a vessel, the tentacles are trying to attack him, but he uses Q assess, and what do you know? He is not a vessel anymore, and that's probably the easiest way to get this annoying debuff off of you. How about if you Zhonya's the little particle effect that flies to the target when it makes them a vessel that you see on your screen right there? Will that prevent yourself from becoming a vessel if you don't let that particle effect actually hit you? Well, let's finally find out right here from that same clip that I just showed you guys, and you can see that that particle effect actually doesn't mean anything, it's just there for, well, visual effects. And Zilean's hard-earned hourglass was still unable to stop him from becoming a vessel. But what if he uses Zhonya's as I kill his spirit that I pulled out? Will that still make him turn into a vessel? Well, as you see on your screen here, as I kill the spirit while he was in the Zhonya's state, well, he still became a vessel, and there's really just almost no escaping it. Feels bad, man. The next one is asking, can Echo or Callista use their ultimate to get out of Illaoi's E ability without turning into a vessel? So first let's test this out with Echo, since his ultimate does essentially make him untargetable. But the question is that enough to stop him from becoming a vessel? The answer, unfortunately, is no. But how about Callista's ultimate? I mean, we do know how Callista is just amazing when it comes to saving her allies from really bad situations with her ult, but unfortunately this isn't enough to save them from the Kraken Priestess. Moving on to the next one, how does Illaoi's E and teleport or backing interact together? So first things first, we'll test this with teleport, and as I pull out Teemo's soul, even though he doesn't really have one, he teleports away and he still becomes a vessel even though he went across the map. So it seems like no matter how you really leave the range of the spirit, you still become a vessel regardless. And I'm sure you can probably guess exactly what happens when we test this with the backing animation instead. Pull out the soul that doesn't exist and he goes back to his base, becomes a vessel, and the tentacles start spawning trying to hit him. This has definitely gotta be one of the most annoying abilities within League of Legends. And the final myth of this episode, can spirits be targeted by ults like Zed or Ashe ultimate? So based on how the other myths have went, Illaoi's E ability seems to only interact as you would expect it with Illaoi's own abilities only. But in this example, you can actually see Ashe's arrow does hit the champion clone and it will interact with it as you may expect it to at the beginning of the video. So this is definitely how you want to see it happen compared to some of the other examples. But next, let's test this also with Zed. And even champions like Zed can also use their single target ultimates on the clone that is pulled out to deal quite a bit of damage to the champion, in this case being Soraka. Alright guys, that marks the end of this episode of League of Myths featuring Illaoi. If you did enjoy this extra information-packed episode, definitely hit that like button to show your support, and if you want to see more, make sure to share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't, check out the other videos and the other episodes of this series as well, and I truly thank each and every one of you for checking out this video. Peace.